Kamie Sligers, and I'm going to be talking about women's health. And this is my favorite topic next to the lymphatic system. So I have been working with women for about 10 years now with usually it's menopausal type symptoms, but I'm working more into PMS and fertility, which was not what I was expecting. So things have changed a little bit in the last few years in my practice and how it's evolved. Definitely evolved. It definitely makes a richer practice when you can work with women at all levels and stages of their life. And I do work with predominantly women. I will work with men, but it's not usually where I tend to gravitate to. I just feel that I have had enough experience in my life, even though I haven't went through menopause yet. I've worked with enough women through menopause to be able to have a really good base for it, along with my education, of course. So anyway, so we're going to talk a little bit about the stress and sex hormones again, like we did on Monday, just to kind of do a little skim over to make sure that we are refreshed and we're current. Plus, we have a few new people that weren't a part of the lecture on Monday. So we're going to talk about the stress and sex hormones. We're going to talk about Eastern versus Western a little bit and the philosophies and how they differ. I am not anti-Western. So I used to be more, but I'm not anti-Western. It's just there's a different philosophy on how we look at illness and how we look at viruses and disease and how we look at pandemics and all of that kind of stuff. So the view is a little bit different. And I'll talk more about that actually on Monday when I talk about the immune system. And then we're going to talk about causes for both reproductive issues, meaning menstruation, menopause, and then even post. So that's going into just healthy daily living and things that affect our body's function, are from functioning properly. And then I'll talk a little bit about the lymphatic system, which is definitely an area that I've did a lot of study in the last year. So to get started, we'll talk about the stress and sex hormones. So we have the stress hormone, which is cortisol, and we have the sex hormones, which are progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone. So we do have all three. The significance is when our adrenals are producing cortisol and doing it very efficiently, our body is healthy. Our body runs well. It has the energy that it needs because cortisol offers energy for us. So does testosterone. That is the job of testosterone, is to offer energy and to help us have that drive and that push. So when we're balanced, our body uses energy that comes from fat. So instead of using sugar or simple carbohydrates for fuel, it goes straight into our fat storage, which is a long and sustainable storage. So we want our body to be using fat to be able to burn energy versus sugar. And not the food that just comes into our mouth, but we want to use the stuff that's been stored and is on reserve. When our body's functioning properly, it does it exactly how it's supposed to do it. But when we are more stressed out, when we tend to be running ourselves a little bit thin, when we are using our energy and our surpluses and start to fatigue out our adrenal system, it starts to look for other sources. So the three other sources that our adrenals will go for energy are first our reproductive system, because the hormones of progesterone and testosterone turn very easily into cortisol. So it'll go there first. Our brain will say, hey, adrenals, I need more energy. So it will go and steal it from wherever it can. So it'll start with our reproductive, usually starts with the reproductive system and takes away from our progesterone levels and our testosterone levels, which leaves estrogen unchecked. So this means that our estrogen levels, it doesn't mean that they necessarily rise, because Western calls it estrogen dominance. In Eastern medicine, we call it progesterone deficient, which is actually it's more technical, because it's not that necessarily estrogen is rising, although it can, because of environmental pollutants and hormones in our food and in our water can definitely play a part in that, but those are bad estrogens. We're talking about the good estrogens that our body makes to be able to function properly, and they get out of check. So progesterone's job in our hormone system is to be able to regulate estrogen during certain times of the month. And it doesn't matter what phase of your life you're in. So if you're in your later years, so postmenopausal, you still have estrogen and progesterone because they help for mood and they help for pretty much every function in our body. And when they're not in check, when they're out of balance, it doesn't mean they sit at the same level, and they hardly ever are at the same level. It means estrogen's here, progesterone's here, and they're kind of doing this wave thing. We still have a cycle. And that cycle is really important because when progesterone gets depleted because of stress, because of adrenal fatigue, then we run into a whole lot of other issues, even postmenopausal hot flashes. And usually it's mood swings and forgetfulness. And then that can lead into sleep issues and on down the road. So I'll go back to where cortisol grabs energy from. So then our brain says, hey, I need more energy, but we have very little progesterone and testosterone, if any, left. So it'll go to our thyroid or it'll start going into our blood sugar. And what it does is it creates issues here. So when it attacks our thyroid, what it does is it asks it for more energy. So our thyroid's job is to create energy and metabolism. So it'll say, hey, I need more energy. Hey, I need more energy. And the adrenals aren't very smart. They just do what they're told by the brain. So it'll steal more energy. And then our thyroid starts to not work properly. And our thyroid takes most of the brunt of the storm from our environmental toxins. So when our body takes in, especially chemicals coming from construction, chemicals in the air, stuff that depletes our iodine levels, then our thyroid can't properly process and get rid of those things. And this leads to a whole nother cascade of events. But I've got a breast cancer talk that talks a little bit about the thyroid and the iodine and why that's important. But what happens then is our body starts craving things, and this is where we start craving simple sugars, simple carbohydrates, caffeine. We crave shopping, so stuff that we can get an instant feed of dopamine, meaning our body is craving some sort of energy, and dopamine is really an easy energy. And so I'm sure a lot of us have heard all this information that's going around about dopamine and our instant gratification from scrolling. And there's a lot of research around that, which is really fascinating stuff, how our attention span has gotten so short that if we don't, as practitioners, if we don't catch your attention within the first couple of minutes, you've pretty much been lost. And so that it's really interesting to think of how that plays an effect in how stressed we are. So looking at people's stress level and the fact that all of these systems have been depleted and our body is craving dopamine means that we must be running a little low in our adrenal tanks. And so there's things that you can do, and I will talk about that in a little bit. So when our adrenals are fatigued, our body no longer uses fat as fuel and goes to the simple sugars and carbohydrates for fuel. So then it completely bypasses the fat stores. And then what it does is it ends up storing things as fat because it's in this protective mode of, if I die, it doesn't matter if my reproductive system and my digestive system and my immune system work. So when our body goes into fight or flight or releases cortisol because of some sort of danger, our body shuts down other major systems of our body. So it shuts down our digestive system because we no longer need to digest food. We no longer need to reproduce, and our immune system is of no use at that point. So when our body shuts this down, it's ready to fight or to flee. This is significant because if our body's in this once in a great while, that's perfectly fine. But in our society, how many of us are only in fight or flight in a major situation? So we're talking about extreme situations, car accidents, getting chased by a tiger. I haven't been chased by a tiger yet, but but situations like that. Also, there is stressful events like losing a parent or a child or a friend or extreme life changes. But the idea is you're able to recalibrate your life so that you can find some sort of balance again. And the sooner you can find that balance, whether it's being able to activate some sort of practices that bring a state of calmness in, that's usually the best practice. That's what I did when I was going through a lot of the stressful times in my life. I found that if I didn't have my practices, I couldn't imagine going through what I went through over the last 5 years without my practices. I don't know how the regular population does it. I don't know how they do it because I had significant life changes. And those changes were stressful, but I was able to maintain a state of balance the best that I could in what I was going through. And you can read about that on my blog if you want to. It's on whenshifthappens.org, and there's more information about who I am and what I stand for on there. But going back to the stress and sex hormones. So they have a really close correlation. And we don't usually look at it that way. We tend to be lack of education around our hormones and what they mean. We start to hear more when we're going through menopause or when we're going through significant fertility issues. It's like, oh my gosh, my estrogen levels are so high and this and that, and what can I do? And in Eastern medicine, we look at what's the real problem here? Is it really the hormones, or is there something else going on? And we look at the lymphatic system as being a huge issue with hormone imbalance. So stress, of course, is part of the issue, but our lymphatic system is the drains of our body. So right now there's a lot of information around our immune system, and our lymphatic system is part of its function is immunity. But first, it's draining the toxins and byproducts out of our body. So it pulls out proteins and fats and puts them out of our system and into circulation and processes. It also takes out environmental toxins. So it's the drains of our body. So when we think of the lymphatic system, think of your sink in your kitchen. So the blood, the circulatory system, the blood that gets pumped through our heart and through our entire body is the faucet. So you turn on your faucet runs, faucet runs, faucet runs. Drain is working, it's going to keep on going through. So imagine your sink is a cell or organ tissue. The drain is our lymphatic system. And if that drain is working well, we will not have any digestive issues. We won't have any reproductive issues. We won't have any brain fogginess because our systems are working properly. If those drains get clogged, and they sit on every part of our skin, so they sit on the inside of our skin, on the outside of our body, and all of the skin on the inside of our body. So we have skin from the tip of our nose all the way to the out areas. So there's skin lining every single inside of our organ, along with the skin that we see on the outside. And because this lymphatic system sits there, it's the drain of every single cell of our body. And if those drains are clogged, we see lots of different issues, from digestive issues to reproductive issues to cognitive issues, and everything from the simplest thing to the most complex things. So even like cancer and colds and viruses, because once lymphatic system is clogged, then the other systems can't do their job properly. And that's some of the interesting things about some of the lung stuff that's going on right now, is how the lymphatic system plays a part in that. Okay, so getting back to Eastern versus Western. So Eastern medicine looks at what is the foundation? What's the root cause of what's really going on here? And we look at the lymphatic system, and then we look at the symptoms that show up and what could be lying deeper within. Western medicine often looks at just how can we fix the symptoms. So if we're seeing estrogen dominance or our lack of progesterone, they'll give progesterone as a fix. But that doesn't fix the problem. And the bad thing about getting hormones or taking hormones in is the fact that your body will no longer make them. So unlike melatonin is a molecule that can act like a hormone. You can take a melatonin and your body will learn how to produce melatonin. The other hormones are not that way. So when you take estrogen, progesterone, or testosterone, your body stops making them. And this is where the issue comes in with women taking birth control for so long. And I did it too. It was before I knew my body very well and was educated in what it meant. And when we take any sort of hormone supplement, our body shuts that process down. So for me to look at infertility, I see a lot more issues with how long have women been on hormone supplementation, and their body no longer knows how to produce estrogen, progesterone at the right rates to create fertility and then to have a proper menstrual flow, versus let's just give them some more drugs so that they can get pregnant. Well, they still got to hold on to that pregnancy for 9 months. And so this is some of the things that I look at when I work with women is like, what is the real cause here? How can we nourish the system to be able to bring it back up? And that's what I want to encourage you ladies is it is about nourishing your system. Once it starts to get depleted, you still have to work on nourishing it. And in our world, so often, you know, our menstrual cycle has been taught, we've been taught that it's a curse. It's a curse. Oh, the curse. I've got the curse. Oh, I've got my period. Oh my gosh, I've got to do this. It's really a beautiful cycle. If you think about it, it's called the moon cycle, right? I'm sure we've heard that terminology before. It's our moon cycle. Well, the moon cycle is 28 days. And in each phase of that cycle, the moon looks a little different. Our hormones are the same way. So the female hormones also have different levels of progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone during the month. So we have our period, everything's super low at that time, and then estrogen climbs like crazy to be able to build the uterine wall. And then progesterone builds up to be able to hold the uterine wall in place. And then after ovulation, estrogen drops significantly. The thing is our emotions and our feelings are closely linked with this. So as we're rising, we also have a little bit of testosterone because testosterone is the hormone that gives us libido. So if our testosterone is low during ovulation, we're going to have less sex drive. Where if our testosterone rises a little bit during the peak of ovulation, we're going to have this beautiful sex drive. We're going to have this beautiful orgasm that goes along with it. And that's the wonderful part of all those hormones working together. But when they start to fall, then a lot of times our emotions can go along with it. And progesterone's not the best one to regulate emotions. But the estrogen levels falling is when we feel that kind of crash. And then we hit a little bit before we go into, before we start shedding their uterine lining. I find this just absolutely fascinating how there's such a close link, even to break it down day by day during, for those of us that are still menstruating, to break it down day by day. And because we still have our cycle to give the cues of when things are going on. Women that are past it, you can use the moon as a guide. And if you really are tapped into nature, you will be able to feel that your estrogen start to rise a little bit, your testosterone start to rise a little bit. You might have a little more libido to be able to go along with it, or a little more energy, or a little more focus. That also comes with having testosterone. And having too much is not a good thing either, because then we start growing hair in areas that women should not be growing hair. And so that can be that imbalance too. But keeping that balance and recognizing that balance is important. So looking into Eastern and Western medicine, Westerners we look at as a curse. And in the Ayurvedic text, they talk about that when we bleed, so when we have our menstrual cycle, this is when our uterus is crying because it's not bearing a child. Isn't that beautiful? It's like, oh my gosh, that completely changed my perspective on my menstrual cycle. I'm like, oh, I'm crying from the inside. So it's a little bit different flavor of what's going on. And in Eastern medicine, like the menstrual cycle is very it's very respected. So women will work pretty hard during the rest of their cycle, but when they get close to menstruation, they, in some cultures, actually go to the red tent, where they go and they're with other women and they're kind of separated from everybody else, which maybe isn't such a bad idea for some of us. I think sometimes that I should just go up north for that week, because I would be in solitude, I would be more internal. And if we really tapped in, we would notice that our bodies do get more internal. So for those of you that are in a past menopause and no longer bleeding, you can look at that. Is there a time in the month where you just all of a sudden feel very internal, feel like you want to study, feel like you want like this deep time where you feel like you want to nourish yourself more and rest more? If you can track that, you can probably figure out where you are in your cycle then, because that at that point you would be just premenstrual and going into menstruation, because after we start menstruating, then our estrogen levels start to rise again. But you'd be in that premenstrual phase, and that's when we do want to hunker down and heal. I got to the point in my last years, because I was a long distance runner. I ran ultra marathons, so 50 to 100-mile races. And when I would do these races, I would purposely check my cycle because it's so consistent, and I would not schedule a race when I was menstruating, because I knew that I would increase my chances of getting injured and not have the energy to be able to finish a race of that length. And there's a lot of athletes that talk about this, female athletes, just like, I just don't have as much energy during my menstrual cycle versus the other parts of my cycle when I have higher testosterone. Then we really have that zone thing going on because it helps that. Okay, so some of the causes for, and this goes for all phases, so it doesn't matter what part of your life you're in, but making sure that you're following what we call the Ayurvedic clock. Or one of my clients has pointed out to me, she calls it eating the Ayurvedic pie. Because if you watch some of my other videos, I talk about Ayurveda, and this is my Eastern medicine that I practice. And we talk about how different times of the day have different properties. And then different times of our life, we have different properties, and also different times of the year. And that's a whole nother lecture, and you can watch it on my YouTube or on my website when shift happens. It's free information. Go ahead and enjoy it. But we talk about how important it is to go to sleep at certain times, wake up at certain times, and eat at certain times, especially those things, even exercising, because what this does is it can cause balance or cause disturbance in our menstrual cycle, in our digestive system, our function of our immune system, our cognitive ability. Because if we don't get enough sleep at night, especially between 10 and 2, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., that is when our body's completely detoxifying. So when we start to lose this disconnect from nature's rhythm, so we notice that the sun comes up in the east and then falls in the west. We want to make sure we're following that cycle of the daylight cycle. This is called circadian science. Ayurveda has been following it for about 5,000 years, since the beginning of Ayurveda, and Western medicine is starting to adapt to it, which is super exciting for people like me, because we're talking in depth about the importance of following the daylight cycle. Another thing is making sure that you have a healthy lifestyle. And so many people, I mean, it is so hard to figure out what is a healthy lifestyle. What is a healthy lifestyle? Well, if you're following the seasons, you're eating fairly seasonal food. If you're following the daylight cycle, if you're eating and exercising at appropriate times, if you're eating at consistent times, all of these things are going to play a part in a healthy lifestyle. What you take in for food is actually the least important thing. I mean, besides eating complete junk, that's a whole nother thing. But if you're eating fairly healthy and you're doing everything else pretty clockwork, you're going to see significant changes, like significant changes. I've seen people, by changing the time that they eat their supper, so the evening meal, you probably call it dinner. When they eat their evening meal, if they eat it at 6 o'clock or earlier and don't eat anything else for the rest of the night, so they fast. It's called intermittent fasting, but we do it a little different in Ayurveda than what the Westerners do. Our fasting goes from 6 p.m. till 6 or 8 a.m., depending upon when you eat your breakfast. It's the best time to fast, because then your body starts cleaning out everything. Westerners tend to do fasting from whenever they get done eating at night, so maybe 8 or 9 o'clock, and then go into and don't eat until noon. And this is actually quite damaging to the cycle, because if you think of what that morning meal is called, break fast, break the fast, it says it in the name. And I call the evening meal supper, because supper translates as something a little extra. So it should also be the smallest meal of the day is the evening meal. And I'll give a little splurb about this. So the meals were changed. If you're a farm kid, you probably still call it supper, but it's called dinner to most people. And it's because when the Industrial Revolution happened, the evening meal became the most important meal of the day, because that was when family could eat together. The parents or the father would work during the middle of the day and have a sandwich and soup or whatever at their work. So they changed that to lunch. But on the farm, we still called it by the traditional. So it'd be breakfast. The noon meal would be dinner, and then the evening meal would be supper, which would be leftovers from the day. So way back, it used to be that we had a huge meal in the middle of the day, and then at night, whatever was left over was made into soup or stew or something like that. The leftovers, something a little extra. So it's kind of interesting to think about how that's changed and how weight gain has become an issue. Okay, so When we look at other causes, improper diet. So improper diet in Western is a little different than Eastern. So Western just looks at you're eating bad foods, good foods. In Eastern, we look at you're eating bad foods and good foods, but there's also foods that don't complement each other. So there's foods that you shouldn't eat together, like fruits, unless they're cooked, should not be eaten with any other food. Again, whole nother topic, and I will cover that in another lecture. But actually, it's on my YouTube channel too, so you can check that out. There's one on nutrition, and I talk a little bit about the food complementing food and not complementing food. Um, and then doing things in excess. So we know this, right? We know that stress causes issues in our body, whether it's something we notice right away, like heart palpitations or not being able to sleep or something like that, all the way to excess in exercise. And even when I was running ultra marathons, I slept well. I had a regular menstrual cycle. All my teachers were really surprised by that. But what I did is I made sure when I rested very, very well. And so if you're going to work hard, being very mindful that there are certain times of the month, especially as women, especially if we're still cycling and we can get into these rhythms, that you want to nourish yourself more. When your body is releasing, it's a really good time to really nourish deeply. And for those of you that are past it, if you can figure out when you cycle, great. If you can't, then just take 1 week a month where you nourish yourself a little more and kind of pull back and maybe rest a little bit more. And even if it's just a couple of days, but really rest. In Western, our ways of resting is sitting on the TV and not really functioning, where rest would be maybe being with really nourishing people that really support you. And I know that's hard during what we have going on, but you can still have nourishing conversations with people, and there's Zoom and there's Skype and all of these other ways to be able to connect. And as women, we have to connect. We are gatherers. There's a reason for that. Way back in the day, we would bring people together. That was our job, was to gather things, gather people, gather community, create community. It is our job. Men were the hunters, linear, go out and kill the beast, bring it back and feed. If they didn't bring anything back, guaranteed we had something ready because we were gathering other things. But we've lost that sense of community. And that sense of community is way deep inside of us. So if you're starting to feel lonely or detached and somebody crosses your mind, shoot them a text. What does it take to text somebody for 2 seconds, or to even drop a phone call, or even leave a voicemail? Sometimes just leaving a voicemail is good enough, because like, okay, that person, I've made my connection because they've crossed my mind. Or reach out and ask for help. Often when we create these very positive boundaries of asking for help or saying no to things that we really can't do, we start creating really strong relationships with people. I know that I've found that as I've matured, which I'm so grateful for. I love being in my 40s. It's such a blessing. I would not want to go back to my 20s and 30s. You could pay me enough to go back into my 20s and 30s. My 40s, I'd like to roll out for another 20 years, because it's really fantastic. It has been hard, but it's also been such a beautiful experience to be in this age where I've gathered all of this beautiful information, wisdom, and knowledge from my teachers and from life experience. And I have all of this to look forward to be able to test it on. And when we can sit from that place and create really, really beautiful boundaries with people. So being able to say yes when we really mean yes, and being able to say no when we really mean no. And this is hard. And this is really hard for some of us. Some of us have been kind of just doing the thing, and we do the thing well. I had to learn it. I didn't grow up that way. My mom said yes to everything, but she also died at 48 years old, well, 58 years old. So there's a reason. She was very depleted. Um, and so we want to be able to create these boundaries, and those boundaries create more health and vitality in us. And in that way, we also build stronger relationships. You'll lose some people, because some people just, they expect you to say yes all the time. But some people, a lot of people, you won't. And you'll actually gain a lot more respect from them. And that's really, those are good, strong relationships. And these relationships are important for a healthy life and not having that excess in our life. And then the final thing is talking about suppressing the urges. So how often as women do we suppress urges? A lot, right? So not going to the bathroom in public or not farting, when we need to. Yeah, at home, do the thing, fart. All right. But these things are important because the more we suppress our urges, so energetically, especially any downward movements, as women, we tend to suppress them, whether it be that we use tampons and stop our bleeding from happening, or we suppress farting or going to the bathroom. And this is key because that movement needs to happen. So that downward movement of energy is an important energy in our body, just like the upward energy is. And if our downward energy gets taken, so this is called prana vayu, means upward, apana vayu means downward moving energy. So when these energies start to steal from each other, and it can be talked about as cortisol and the reproductive hormones again, because it's the same thing, just a little different lingo. When our upward energy starts to steal from our downward energy, so when cortisol starts stealing from our reproductive system, then our reproductive system, when it needs to shed, has to steal from up here. And what happens when it starts stealing from our upward energy is it makes us tired and fatigued and forgetful and emotional and moody. So it's interesting when you talk about it in the Eastern, so that's the Eastern philosophy of it, and then the Western talking about the actual hormones, how it's the same stuff, and they've been talking about it for 5,000 years. So it's important to have this relationship and really feel it in your body. When your body wants to release, there's a reason for it to want to release. Most of the stuff that goes down and out of our body is a byproduct, is something that's no longer needed. Just like before we menstruate, our body goes through a detoxifying process. It detoxifies everything. That's the beauty of being a woman. We get these beautiful detoxifications that men don't get to have. And it's because we have more hormones and we have more systems running because of our reproductive system. But we want to make sure that energy moves down and out. Just like during the rest of the time, we want that energy staying up. We want that energy to be functioning in our brain and everything else circulating properly. Okay. Another thing is that often we look at resting as a sign of weakness. And I think this is this is one of those things where we were taught we have to work, right? And especially those of us that are in that age of probably my age and older, we were taught to push pretty hard, and we were pushed into a male society. So we were supposed to perform like men. We're supposed to be like men. We're supposed to drive like men. We are not men. We are not designed that way. We are designed to be able to function and create community. That's why I'm just a little bit excited about having a female vice president, because women are really amazing at building community. It is our job. Like, we are good at it. And some women are better at it than others. Like, I'm not one of those women that's like all about like bringing everybody together and cooking and stuff like that. But I do a different kind of that. It's just a different kind of spread of it. But we're designed that way. And when we put ourselves in jobs, and I'm not bashing anybody's jobs, I think it's so beautiful that women are doing these really amazing things and driving. But if you look at the women that are really standing out now, it's because they're bringing community together. It's because they're driving to create a bigger purpose for a lot of people versus I'm doing this for me. And there's nothing wrong with doing it for you, but at the same time, it's a different point of set. So testosterone is a single focused type of energy. Estrogen is a building energy. So it builds in our body. When estrogen gets out of control in our body, it creates cysts and growths and tumors in our body. When testosterone is driving too hard, it depletes us. So as women, if we drive too hard, we will get depleted. And it shows up always in our reproductive system first, and then everything else kind of goes haywire after that. Well, usually digestive system first, and and then reproductive system, depending on your constitution. Ayurveda looks at things a little bit differently that way. When a man depletes himself, their testosterone levels lower down, which is not good because they become very moody. They become really hard to be around, really hard to be around. So this is where men get more aggressive in the not productive way. So men are supposed to be aggressive in that playful, fun, moving forward and driving forward type way, not in the aggression of passive aggressive, more type behavior. And they'll get depressed. And so when men start to get depleted, what they need to do is go do something, not sit on the couch and rest. They need to go do something. They need to go fix a car. They need to go play in the dirt. They need to go be with men. So if you have a significant other and they seem really stressed out and depleted by work, don't have them stay home with you and the kids. Have them go hang out with their boyfriends so they can get that stuff out of their way. They'll probably come back a lot happier. And there's a reason why men need their guy time, because we can't offer that for them. You might be their soulmate, but we can't offer that for them. Just like they can't offer certain things to us because they don't have that ability. So for us to drive and drive and drive and drive and do and do and do and do, that's fine. But when you crash and burn, when you go on vacation and you crash and burn so bad that all you do is sleep, that's a sign you are so far beyond, you're beyond your body's ability to be able to function. And if you took more time to be able to rest, and what we need when we get stressed is not to do more, not to go run, not to go do that. We need to pull back and we need to rest. And it's not a weakness. And it's the hardest thing to do. And I'm so guilty of it because I'm a doer. I've always been that. I was raised that way. And I love my work. I love what I do. There is nothing more motivating for me than to give you guys this information, to present this information to you. But I can get so consumed in my work that people won't see me for a long time. And COVID's been great for me because I don't have no expectations of seeing anybody. I can just work all the time. But I find myself going out and hanging out with my chickens and then going out for a walk with my dog. And so making sure that you have that time and realize that rest doesn't have to be this big, elaborate day off spa type thing, because that might not be all that restful for you. But being able to rest in that way of that you can have something that's fairly consistent in your life. So again, I'm going to go back to the Ayurvedic pie, so to speak, and take a bite of that pie, is if you can create a really rich practice, meaning in the morning and at night, you start and you end your days the same. What happens is your brain no longer has to think about these things to do. You just kind of do it. So it's like in the morning when you get up, you go to the bathroom, you brush your teeth, you wash your face, you start your day. However, that ends up showing up after that. But you have things you just do because it's unconscious. We want our practices to follow that. So when we start getting into a really good practice, doing 5 minutes of meditation in the morning while you're drinking your lemon water for digestion and elimination, doing that every day. And then maybe eventually you're like, oh, I would like to maybe do a short yoga class or a couple stretches. Perfect. These are catered times for you to be able to nourish yourself. Eating a really good breakfast is so important. And it doesn't have to be this crazy, elaborate breakfast. It can be a little bowl of oatmeal, or it can be, I eat seven Sundays. It's based here out of Minnesota. It's a really good oatmeal combination. It stays in my system for a long time. I'm a big breakfast eater, so I will eat a fairly big bowl of it. But eating a good nourishing breakfast, eating a bowl of fruit, like having something in your body that's going to deeply nourish your body. And when you start your day out right, your day is going to go better. And the idea is that during the day, give a little gratitude for the things that go right. Like you make it to work. It's like, whew, made it to work. Well, some of us just have to walk into the other room right now, but giving a little gratitude for the simple little things in life. And then when that one thing that goes sideways during the day hits you, you'll be like, well, I had 50 good things go right today. This isn't so bad. Because how often do we focus on the one bad thing that goes wrong during our day and not the 50,000 good things that go right every day? So taking that time at the end of the day to give gratitude. So I often journal. So I'll do a little topic or bullet point. I'll have three dots and I'll write down chickens, and then Rufus, that's my dog. And then I'll write down work. And you don't even have to write anything more. It's more like putting some awareness to certain topics. Or you can write down, had a nice day with my chickens, or my chickens laid 4 eggs today. And that, that always gets me excited because I love eggs. But so just taking a little time to be grateful for what's went right during the day. Plus, this helps us wind down. Gratitude practices are extremely powerful, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Like they're very, very, very powerful. If you do them before bed, what it does is it resets your mind, and you might sleep better. So I've had some people talk to me about sleep, and that's one of the things I find, that is, if I can do a brain dump, meaning if I've got a lot of things going through my mind, do a little brain dump before bed, do my gratitude before bed, I do my prayer before I go to bed, or my little meditation, and then I sleep like a baby. So there's so much I can talk about, but let's see. A couple other things to notice is if you, it isn't always hormones that's out of balance. I was talking about the lymphatic system a little bit earlier. So some of the things to notice if your lymphatic system is out of whack, and this kind of goes a little bit separate from the hormone system, but it's very closely related. If you notice that your rings get tight on your fingers, if you're stiff and sore in the morning, if you feel tired in the morning, if you're retaining water, if you have rashes on your skin, a lot of times what our lymphatic system does is if it's irritated on the inside, it'll start pushing the toxins out through our skin. And that's a sign that our lymphatic system on the inside isn't working very well, meaning even in our digestive tissues and stuff like that. Weight gain, especially in the belly. And a lot of times when women gain weight in their belly in perimenopause or menopause, it's usually stress. So estrogen causing, and not enough progesterone and testosterone to help balance things out. But it can also be that the lymphatic system is clogged. Again, very closely related to each other. Brain fog, breast swelling or soreness. So those of us that are still menstruating, if you have soreness in your breasts, that is a definite sign of lymphatic stuff, because a lot of lymph nodes in here, ladies, a lot of them. And when they get congested, it's known, especially if you're still menstruating, because they're going to be sore. It's the number one thing. So if they start getting congested, that is not a good sign. Because if we look at the breast cancer rates right now, what says there isn't a direct correlation between lymphatic stagnation? Breasts are made of, there's a lot of lymph nodes around our breasts, and breast cancer, right? Seems a little too close of a connection. Yeah, I think so too. Dry skin, hypersensitivity. So that means physically, mentally, emotionally hypersensitive to everything. Headaches, migraines can fall on that. Histamine reactions, so environmental histamine reactions, so allergies, and then constipation, diarrhea, and mucus in stools. So these are all signs that your lymphatic system is out of balance. And how many of us at least have one of them going on, right? So the lymphatic system can get a little bit tricky, but there is some simple things that you can do. And so I will give you a couple little things that you can try. If you have more questions, I would love to answer more questions about that. But one of the things you can do is, there is a herb called mangista. Mangista is a red herb, and it's a good decongestant for the lymph, and it's a good antioxidant. So if you know that you have lymphatic stuff going on, and this is something I can talk to you about too, is that mangista is really a powerful herb, and there's no side effects. It's super gentle, and that's the best part about it. And you take it in the morning with your breakfast, and then you would take it at night before you go to bed. And we take it at night because at night our body does a lot of decongesting, and we want to help it along. There's a bunch of other herbs to be able to go, and I make my own herb combinations for my clients, because we've been doing some lymphatic cleaning, because I've got a couple clients with different kinds of cancers and stuff going on. We just want to get their lymph going. At least if we can get that lymph going, then hopefully their body can fight off and do its thing with the other chemicals that are added into their body for treatments and stuff like that. Um, but with the Mangista, we take it at night because our brain actually, the cells in our brain actually shrink a little bit, and our synovial fluid, which is also our lymphatic fluid, goes through our brain and flushes it out at night. So this is why the sleep between 10 p.m. and 2 o'clock in the morning is really important, because this is when our brain is detoxifying the most. All right. And then laying on your left side is kind of key. This helps our brain release toxins even more. So if you can sleep on your left side, or at least try to get yourself to sleep on your left side, it's been proven to work. You'll notice that your brain will be a little bit, will function a little bit better in the morning. All right. So Mangista, I do something with my clients called hot sips. So hot sips is taking water in like a thermos. So I have my cool thermos here. I also have my own tea company. so I have my thermos and I sip on hot water. Hot water is ideal because hydrating our body, our lymphatic system's base is water based. So we want the water to be able to help our lymphatic system to be able to flush things out. Plus it hyperhydrates our body. Half your body weight in ounces is about where you should be at. And with the hot sips, what you do is every 10, 15 minutes, you take a little sip of hot water, and it should be hot enough that it's just uncomfortable. So you're taking the sip and it's hot water. And that's why a thermos is ideal. A cup of water on your desk after, especially as cool as it is now outside, even in your house, it's going to cool fairly quickly. So I always recommend that. If you're still menstruating, the best time to do that is the week between ovulation and menstruation is the ideal time to be able to do that. So you have about 14 days, so about 2 weeks to be able to do that. Skin brushing is really good. So it's called Garshna, and you take raw silk gloves. You can also use a brush. So there's body brushing also. If you're very vata, so if you're very thin and frail and light, I wouldn't recommend this. That would be something we'd have to talk about because it's a little bit different practice. If you're a little thicker body, so if you're more kapha based body, very good to do pretty much any time of the year, because you have a different skin system to work with, and you have a different body function to work with. But we're in the vata season, so we don't want to aggravate the constitution too much. But what it does is it creates this static, and the static helps to alkaline your body. So it's a pretty fantastic practice. Another thing is to make sure that you're using oils versus lotions. Most lotions, about 99% of them, have chemicals in them that are not good for us. And actually, they can be quite addictive. So they actually dry our skin out more than they help. That's why people often say, oh, I keep on putting lotion on, but it keeps on getting dry. I'm like, it's because it's got mineral oil in it. Like mineral oil actually dries it out. So it creates it's an addictive substance. Oil is much better. So they make really beautiful, I'm not talking about these little tiny oil bottles. I'm talking about actual massage oils. I don't have any in my shelf right now, but there's Maharayan oil, and Maharayan has got Mangista in it also. And you can get that at Banyan Botanicals. It's got a nice smell to it. What I do with my oils is I take a shower at night. So I put it on my skin after I get done with the shower. I finish my other stuff up, like, putting stuff on my face and brushing my hair and brushing my teeth. And then I get ready for bed. And it tends not to do any damage to my sheets or my clothes. Although after a few years, you should get new sheets anyway. So that's kind of here or there. It's not very much oil. So the idea isn't to like load your skin. It's to keep a light layer on. There's a practice called Abhyanga. Abhyanga, you put a significant amount of oil and you sit in the oil. It's a different practice, but I can talk about that another time. Another thing is being able to do an alkalizing diet. So eating more fruits and vegetables and less meat, dairy, processed food, breads, grains, that kind of stuff. So that would be great for the lymphatic system. And I'll talk more about the lymphatic system on Monday with the immune system. Pretty great topic. But anyway, thank you.